Thank you so much. We are, uh, I won't say short on time, but we have a crisp 29 minutes and 50 seconds or so to discuss a pretty massive subject. So we'll jump straight into it, data. So data is, obviously it's something that India is superly rich in and excessively rich. There is a flood of data. So everywhere you hear about the data, data is the so-called new oil. It's been given to titles of government policies, like, the e-commerce policy was titled data is the new oil. I think Jaspreet in the earlier part made an interesting point. Okay, it's the new oil, but what's the engine? Is it an EV engine or is it something that, can't use that oil? Would love to have a quick perspective from each of the panelists, on how do we use this data? How is AI helping, analyze it, to study it, make sense out of it? And in the areas that I've been working with, in every place there is this concern about this flood of data, how do we actually analyze it? Cybersecurity it's been a major issue, and all of the government agencies are asking, okay, we've got this, we've asked for 6-hour breach reporting, or we've asked for reporting of threat intelligence, etc. So now we've got billions and billions of records. What do we do with it? Okay, in fintech, of course, in payments, I mean, it's been used for it. It's far more mature than the Gen AI that we are seeing today. It's the analytics that give you the fraud scores, the AML, and all of that. So I think, maybe you could have a quick start on this. How are we leveraging this? What is, where is it going to get us? How do we make the best of this using AI?
Sure, and thanks a lot for the insight and setting the context. As we see data at Mastercard and where I belong at Mastercard, which is AI Garage, we see all kinds of data when people do transactions, right? Not just transactions, but anywhere where there is a transaction happening, there are API calls happening. You see all kinds of cyber data as well, and so on and so forth. And when you see a significantly large amount of data, the most interesting thing that you see is, of course, it's legitimate use, but it's illegitimate use as well. That is how fraudsters get into the systems. That is how the bad guys break into the systems, the Ames news that we had seen earlier, and so on and so forth. So all of these things happen, and when you start to have that data over a significantly long amount of time, 10 years, 20 years, and so on, globally, so like the way Mastercard can see data across 230 different countries where it operates, so then you start to see, okay, the fraudsters are able to break into the system using these kind of mechanisms. First, they will make a $0 transaction, then 2 days later, they'll do something else, and so on. As soon as you learn one particular pattern, then you can realize that you can warn every other place that, boss, something bad had happened here, and this is what you can do to protect your systems now, and so forth. So as you said, when you have like hundreds of billions of data points and so on, the reason you would want to analyze is to understand what are the patterns, what are the good patterns, what have been the bad patterns, so that in the future we can protect ourselves. Now the interesting point here is that it's not just us who's looking at the data. The bad guys have also been looking at the patterns. What they see is, it's like this, right? If you have a security guard in the front of the hotel, and the bad guys keep monitoring what is it that the security guards check. Okay, they check the boot. Okay, they check the bonnet. They check the boot, they check the bonnet. They check the boot, they check the bonnet. So what will the bad guy do? He will bring in the bomb in the passenger seat, right? So that's what the bad guys are doing. They're trying to see what is it that the current AI systems or rule-based systems are able to protect, and therefore they figure out gaps and then they try to get in from there. So that's why it's really important to be on the toes, continue to keep analyzing the data so that we know, and which is what we do here at Mastercard, so that we know which other areas to protect them from.
Okay, terrific. And you brought up a number of points, and I'm going to, maybe dive into some of them. For example, you operate in a lot of geographies. We are seeing quite a few islands and silos of data. It's in India, globally. You have data localization imposed in different places. Is that a threat or an opportunity? But I'll come back to that. Sanjeev and then Nishu.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Prasanto. It's glad to be here. So we are actually connected today through data. And I and Nitendra were just having discussion outside. I just reset my phone yesterday, and I'm kind of paralyzed right now because I'm not getting any SMSs for 24 hours. I can't use my GPay, PhonePe. I can't get any SMS, no transaction. This is where we are with the data. This is how we are connected with the data. We have been producing data through the ages. It's not new. The norm is not new. It's only we realizing the power of data today, and that's where we are trying to leverage it, take it to the next level. If I just talk about us, at Wayfair, it's a like 23-year-old home e-commerce, very niche segment where we have been only keeping on the home category side. And as you all know, pretty much everything you hear is belong to home category. None of this is branded. So all of these things, how do you sell that? How do you build on a data? Because it's a lot to do with the emotional aspects. Over the years, we have seen data or its usage mostly in the form of, okay, what I being recommended, the recommendation engine, the collaborative models, right? That has been the, for the ages, that was the only, kind of data usage that people saw. But now we have come a long way. We have moved away from the just recommendation engine, but analyzing the data, which is not just the data that we have today, but the data that we'll be producing. Because the power that we have through the computes, we have been seeing all around the GPUs, the power of the GPUs are increasing, DeepSeek, the LLM models that Google is producing, quantum chips. All that is connecting the data together, making it so powerful that you can think, which was unthinkable a few years back. That is even at Wayfair, we are trying to leverage that because we are sitting on a 23 years of vast amount of data. So we are trying to connect that with user behavior, what we want to produce, what the social trends are, what other means of data that we are getting from merchandisers, and build a customer experience which is more fruitful, right? At the same time, as Nitendra was talking about, how to keep the frauds away. Because more than us, the ethical folks, they are non-ethical people who are looking at the data. And that is the most vulnerable thing right now that we are on.
Lovely. And so I think fraud, cybersecurity, these are a couple of areas we'll dive a bit deeper into. Nishu, you have, I think, the opportunity to span multiple sectors across clients. So would love your perspective on this.
Thanks, Prasanto. So, yeah, like I work with plethora of clients when it comes to, and specifically, I dwell deeper into the areas of data governance, data quality, metadata, master data. So the kind of work or the kind of challenges that I see is that I think there are multitude or multifold challenges. So there are organizations which are in the very initial stages of leveraging their data to kind of use AI on top of that. So problems like, they don't even understand that what data do they have, right? Where does it come from? Can they trust that data or not? Who should be owning that data in terms of regularly managing that data? So I think a strong foundation of data governance is like the way forward. And while I think everybody wants to hop on to this, this bandwagon of AI, what people really miss is that strong foundation which comes at the base of it, which would make sure that you keep the engine running in the long run, would be the governance that should be put in place. So that is one. Now, the other thing, and to add to it, I think what is important is it should be proactive rather than reactive. A lot of the places, people have already put in a lot of automation in place, but then the issues start occurring, and then they start to kind of, do a backtrack and try to understand where the problem is coming from. And that's when they start talking about governance of it. Rather, it should be the first step. So how do we kind of, have those right set of policies, frameworks, processes, and ownership in place? I think that is really, really important. The other thing that I see is that in the organizations which already have at least that foundation right, and across the sectors, I would say that, whether it is finance, pharma, retail, anywhere, I think what the other set of problem is that they have got some foundation pieces there, but now the idea is to scale it up. And that's where I see that, AI is really going to help, and it is helping because we are working with a lot of clients where we assist them on how they can leverage AI to do that. So for example, whether it is in terms of collecting the data automatically, or whether it is in terms of classification of the data, or whether it is with regards to the lineage that they want to create. In fact, advanced use cases that where, let's say, I want to understand what data means in my organization, which is like crucial to have like metadata. But then if I start going to each and every like steward or owner and start collecting that information, it becomes very, very difficult to have that documented. And that's where, let's say, if I can have those basic things coming through maybe an LLM model, my glossary being powered by an LLM model. And on top of that, I have that somebody really validating that whether this is correct or not. So that at least reduces my cycle time. And that is where AI can help me out by having that foundational piece sitting on top of the basics of data governance that I've already put in place. So I think for me, it's data management for AI and AI for data management. That's the theme that I can possibly see.
Terrific. I think we've covered a lot of ground there. And just to be clear, when you're talking about the importance of governance, you're not necessarily talking about external regulatory frameworks, but your own governance. Now, you may intersect with those frameworks. For example, if you're depending on LLMs to maybe service customer queries, etc., then there may be accountability, there may be liability that you have if somebody brings up a challenge. And then, so is that an issue that when you're looking at governance, you would be concerned about? Well, right now, AI regulation is evolving.
Yeah.
We discussed that a little bit in the previous panel too. And we have certain laws which cover a lot of the ground, including intermediary liability, etc. There's no separate AI law. There is concern about over-regulation in this. So any quick thought on that, and then I'll come back to
So, like I said, I think the way people look at it is that as if, it's the brakes. Ideally speaking, it's actually not the brakes, but it's actually preventing you
rails.
from putting the brakes because it keeps you going.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way that I look at it rather than kind of, looking at it as something that, I just have to adhere to it from a compliance perspective. We need that. Like I said, organizations get into the mode of really first implementing the AI or the automation pieces and then coming back and realizing, oh my God, the data foundation itself is kind of, it's not there. And then they start encountering more and more issues and breaches, which then become very difficult to manage. And then they kind of, go back to this entire piece and start rethinking about it and start thinking about how do I want to have my operational model in place. So that's where I feel that, this has to be like the foundation layer.
Terrific. So let me kind of extend this question a little bit. You've all covered some of the areas that you're using AI, where you see the data. Where are some of the big gaps and challenges which could also be opportunities? For example, we spoke about the cybersecurity thing. Okay, so there's this enormous mass of data. There's an enormous amount of breaches happening. The breaches are now being reported by law in maybe 6 hours. Not everyone's doing that, but whatever. So that's supposed to happen at some point of time. So various government entities will be left with, billions and billions of records which are growing by the hour, etc. So is that a significant opportunity for companies to, come in and solve that problem? What can you do, even as a company which you are customer facing, like whether it's a card, not necessarily the network, but the issuer or the acquirer, etc. There's flood of data which is there. Is localization, which is creating islands, is that an opportunity or is that a threat? So any quick thoughts on this, that what are the big challenges which could lead to opportunities in the Indian ecosystem? Sanjeev, Nitendra, go ahead.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
yeah. I think one of the biggest opportunity is, as Nishu also had pointed out, the people who are going to companies or governments who are going to benefit significantly from this are the ones who make their data foundation strong. It's like today morning my coach was calling me and telling me that my running speed needs to improve, and he said, improve your core muscles. I thought running requires legs, not the core, but that's the thing, that everything that is basic requires the core, and the core of AI is actually data. So if we have a strategy wherein we are not storing the data properly, if we are not encapsulating the data properly, if we are not encrypting the data properly, if we do not have the right controls with respect to region localizations and so on, then today or tomorrow we are ourselves going to make ourselves vulnerable to that breach. On the other hand, if we have a better mechanism of ensuring that we have good encryption, then we can actually work with data localization issues so that you can have an abstraction layer through which you can talk beyond just the data transfers and so on. You can use AI to generate synthetic data which can be used for experimentations when you have problems with respect to passing data of specific demographies and so on. So all these tools, in some sense, unless used very well, we will land into these isolated parts that you're talking about. And it is actually said that organizations do not collaborate as well as the bad actors collaborate. So if they are able to see all the data, then there has to be some mechanism through which you have your own data vaults in place so that AI can actually exploit those. So unless you have that, we are going to be limiting the power of AI that is there.
Terrific. Sanjeev?
Great. If I may add, I think extending the point, we are sitting on a huge amount of data, but a lot of that data is sitting in silos. Silos within the organization, silos across the organizations, silos across the countries. Now, one of the important pieces and that is the opportunity, by the way. So one of the big opportunity here is how do we think of building the standard set of data frameworks, the standard set of data sets that can be leveraged to connect all those data of a similar kind, and that can be used to extend and make a common framework which everybody can leverage. For example, we are producing data about users' behavior. You can extend that data, break a set of data sets which can leverage all kind of user behaviors. There is a standard behaviors, either you're transacting, you're buying, you're purchasing, you're selling, you're walking, like you gave the example, right? Connect this, anonymize that, you are sitting on a billions and billions of transactions, and then give that a framework for everybody to use. Commoditize it. That is one big opportunity. Maybe I will extend the other one, which is again on the compliance side. Nitendra touched on this. We are sitting on a data, but that can be leveraged by the bad guys very easily because they are more connected than us. So how do we have the right set of compliance? How do we have the right ethical approach, ensuring data is secured, like DPDP kind of act, GDPR, having the right compliance within the organization? That's gonna be another piece which we can leverage to ensure data is not misused, but better used.
Okay, super. Nishu, any points to add to that? And we're really looking at areas where there are both challenges and opportunities. You brought up the silos. Now the thing is, there are a lot of silos. There are challenges in interconnecting them, including potential privacy, potential DPDP, emerging rule violations. Credit, for example, has typically drawn on various other data sets. For example, mobile recharge can be used as a data set to, to train or to, draw credit scores. Okay, now is there a privacy issue there? Insurance companies are looking at things like your charges, microcharges in the bank account. Are you buying cigarettes for 17 rupees or whatever it is each? Okay, that's a potential issue on the privacy front, even though it may be aggregated info. In this case, it is not. It's individual information. So, do you see opportunities as well as challenges in using these silos?
Opportunities as well as, I would say, in fact, this is the need of the hour. Because if these silos are not, and that's exactly what silos means, that since data is it's in pockets and it's not talking to each other, how do you even understand that which is the right data for me? And this is exactly the problem that I see with a lot of organizations, because the data is not talking to each other. The master data itself is not very well maintained. And they, there are boardroom meetings and people don't trust what they see on the dashboards or on the reports. So ultimately, every team has like a separate small team sitting and then doing that reanalysis. So even if, let's say, you are leveraging AI, but how well are you able to trust that data? So I think the silos, bridging those silos, and which is, I think, a lot to do also with the cultural aspect of the organization, or for that matter, at large, at India level or at a country level, I think that needs to be resolved. So that's the challenge that I see, and that's where we have to come to a place where we can talk about bridging those gaps in a way where people start following those on an everyday process. In everything that they are doing, they think of how I can make this data good, right? And everything that they do with the data, they make sure that this data is high integrity, and people will not doubt while using this data. The reports that, the people see, the sales number would not be matching with the marketing numbers. So you anyways are not really kind of, making the best use of the information that you have at hand, because you are not bridging those silos. You just want to kind of, make sure that that aspect is resolved before you start kind of, even get onto the next set of this journey.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to just open up for a very few brief questions, but also put this to the panel meanwhile, that if you can think of, untapped or under-leveraged data sets which are just lying around, which are opportunities, what would you pick? It might be directly in your area, it might be, I mean, for example, if you take, you're in payments, you're in retail, e-commerce, there's so much of behavioral information aggregated. If you take transit, okay, how are people actually, what are they using? How much time are they taking to go through an AFC gate in a metro, etc. Okay, is that a data? Or I'm not going to put ideas in your mind, but what would you say would be some massive under-leveraged data sets? And maybe there are some challenges also using them. Before we do that, are there some quick, so if we can have very quick questions, do we have a mic? Or you can just speak up and I'll replay the question. I just want to keep it to 30 seconds per intervention, and then we will bring that back to the panel. Okay, so just go ahead very briefly, just question.
Data, different department in an organization has different data. Like sales has their different data. Marketing team has also generating data day by day. This is the different data, all are in silos. When we compile the entire data and when we ask AI to give us information or pick some of the answer which we are asking the AI, I mean, this is the X answer for a particular question, and then the same question for different department has a different set of answers. So which one should be the right, and how we will educate the AI that you take a data which is accurate.
Okay, so I think this also brings up an interesting question that some of the silos may be sitting inside an organization across, like for a bank, which is typically looking at different products, different departments, there's loans, etc. They often find that, they're not talking to each other, there's no one view of the customer, you're doing separate KYC anyway for every person. Okay, so that's one interesting point. Can we come to the other question too?
Yeah.
Go ahead, very quickly.
I am Rohit from LIT. My question to Nitendra. As we observe daily financial fraud is increasing day by day. So my question to you, does Mastercard having any technological approach to minimize the financial fraud occurring using emerging technologies?
Okay, so I think this maybe if you want to cover off very briefly after we've covered off the others, or you can take offline because it's not maybe fundamental to our discussion. There's a lot of anti-fraud, anti-money laundering, etc., which is fundamental to all the card networks' work. Anybody want to just go on this question of unused data sets? One question on the silos within companies, and is that an opportunity, and how do you actually use that and figure out what is the right version of the truth? Anyone?
I can pick it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and silos within a company, as I just said earlier, is a reality and exists in most of the companies. Because data always have been an afterthought. It is never designed data first. Now with Gen AI, we started leveraging that, but over the years, centuries, data always have been afterthought. Now, coming back to your question, in the end, your different departments are working on a similar set of people. Like for example, your marketing data, your sales data, your, let's say, purchase data, all of those are with some connected people, whether they are your buyers, whether they are people who are browsing your site, if I take just purely retail. What do you want to capture? You want to capture their inputs with respect to where they're clicking, where they're coming from, how they are buying, what they are buying, right? If you keep on collecting data from all those sources and keep dumping into those singular data platform, that's what I was saying, the frameworks within the organization about the common data sets. Once you build that, you are actually punching all this data into a single data pipeline. Now, after that, you can run any kind of BIs, any kind of analytics on that data because that data is connecting now. You can go through the tree, go through the graph, whatever you want to do. You can see somebody who browse through the marketing tech actually end up buying through recommendation. You can connect all those dots. So that's how you can break the silos. I can take more, as I know that we are limited on time.
I can possibly add that I think it's very important that as an organization, the organization really understands that what is their, the authorized source of data, which every department in the organization should be using. So that's the key to it, because I think every specific department actually takes data from a different system altogether and creates their report on the top of it, and that's why the numbers do not match. But if, let's say, there is a common understanding across the organization that, okay, this is where I should be taking my data from for a specific, let's say I take customer data for that example, then every department in the organization, where exactly they should be taking that customer data from, it has to be that authorized source itself. And that's how your numbers would start matching, if that's...
And
Yeah, go ahead.
the only thing I would want to add is the fact that as soon as you break silos, you come up with new opportunities.
Absolutely.
As an example, I mean, look at the data of retail, what people are buying. Combine with the payments data, and you can get a trend about epidemic prediction. Based on what kind of purchases you are doing, you can predict epidemic, is it spreading in this region or that region and so on, which has nothing to do with healthcare, but somehow you can combine these isolated source of data to derive much more information about that. And Jaspreet in his first talk actually mentioned that earlier it used to be business telling IT what needs to be done. Now IT is driving the business, which is the opportunities. In your example, sales data, marketing data, you can actually bridge the two, and then the IT guys can say that, by the way, if you do this kind of a marketing campaign, then this is how your sales can get impacted. So huge opportunities lie everywhere as soon as you break those silos, perhaps.
So I think also challenges come up when you break those silos. And for example, if you are a dominant e-commerce platform, hypothetically, and your visibility into this transaction data, payments data, and what is selling, and you act on that by maybe changing your own products in some way, then the competition regulator gets very interested and floats draft consultations on predatory pricing and things like that, hypothetically speaking only. So I think we are kind of at the end of our time. I'd just like maybe any quick thoughts on untapped data sets, which would be major opportunities, or just breaking these silos. That, last quick thoughts of 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Nishu, you want to go first? Yeah, or
So I think maybe it totally kind of depends. If I talk about, in fact, I think last year itself, in fact, Mrs. Sitaraman also talked about how exactly the government can actually start kind of sharing some data which has to be anonymized, and then every other, like maybe a startup ecosystem can start using that data. Maybe consumer behavior is that kind of data, or there is more like a credit data that can possibly be utilized, but there have to be like the right set of guardrails before that data
so
can...
data as digital public good, sort of an approach.
Yeah.
Okay, Sanjeev, 10 seconds.
I would say health. We talk about UHI, but this is one big untapped area. We are sitting on a huge amount of health, but they're not connected. You go to any hospital, everything is new. You start fresh. It's frustrating for everybody, every person who enters a new hospital. The second would be retail. I think we are sitting on one of the world's largest consumer economy. So retail is what we are sitting on. If we can tap into that, of course, going back to my point of, common data framework.
Is there aggregation of that data? For example, GST, is GST a platform on which a lot of SME data is coming in, or ONDC maybe, which is an aggregator? Because I don't know where that data is going to aggregate.
GST is just one example. I remember 2017 when we started with GST launch in Flipkart. Like, that brought the world together in India, how the taxation has to happen.
Okay.
Earlier it was all disconnected.
Super.
So that is one beautiful example.
Right. Nitendra?
I
10
think
seconds.
I'm most excited about the consolidated data platform that are coming here in India. So like Kosh AI is one, India AI digital platform is one, Certain has all the data sources about all the cyber stuff and so on. So as soon as these consolidated data sources which are coming up gather to get a lot of data, a lot of power is going to come in on top of apps that will sit on these, which is my opportunity area perhaps.
Terrific. I think that sums it up. So there are enormous untapped data sets. There are silos, as we heard. I think the opportunity lies in both looking at connecting them, leveraging them, and also figuring out what are the new challenges that emerge from that in terms of regulatory compliance, emerging laws, DPDP rules, new committee framed guidelines, and all of that. Thanks very much, everybody, and thank you very much, and over to you.